Crushing endless amounts of gigantic bugs with your equally gigantic mecha sounds like a great time, especially in a strategy title, but sometimes it can just be a little too difficult and frustrating to really sink your teeth into. Today, we're going to talk about just that. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, my coverage of turn-based strategy RPGs, roguelite strategy games, etc., a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Today on the Saturday Strategy Spotlight, or the Sunday Strategy Spotlight, depending on when this video is published, we are talking about Into the Breach. I figured it was only appropriate that we do talk about this title, seeing as how I drew numerous comparisons between it and the upcoming Metal Slug Tactics that I had the opportunity to play early. And I realized I'd never really actually shown the game on the channel properly, and as a strategy title that I do very much enjoy, even if I do get frustrated by it sometimes, which we will talk about, I figured now is probably the good time to do so. If you didn't know, Into the Breach is made by the same developers as FTL Faster Than Light, and, as I described at the top of the video, is a strategy roguelite wherein you're destroying giant bugs. Think Helldivers, but instead of being boots-on-the-ground soldiers, you are a bunch of pilots who travel through time and pilot giant kaiju-destroying robots to try and save the world. It's a pretty good time. When I first heard about the title, when it was announced, I was like, this is absolutely 150% my jam. And while I was not wrong, myself and some of my friends who decided to play the game alongside me quickly realized that Into the Breach is a very unforgiving mistress. How it works is you will start a run and you get to select between a number of different teams of 3 different robots. You start off with your basic kind of straightforward simple teams, and then as you complete runs and gain tokens, you can use those tokens to unlock other squads, all of which typically have some sort of theme. You've got your fire team, your electricity team, a freeze team, a team that's entirely dedicated to using judo moves to throw bugs around and keep them from attacking things, a team that's entirely dedicated to putting acid on enemies and make them take more damage. A variety of different options were available at launch, and a number more were added a few years after release with a free update, which is pretty awesome. Once you get in and you're on the quote-unquote world map, you'll see that you have a number of islands available to you that you can choose from to start on. Each of these has its own advantages and disadvantages, typically different themed terrain or missions, such as the Ice Island having a bunch of robots that may or may not be frozen and a bunch of ice terrain that you have to deal with, either your units being frozen, enemy bugs being frozen, etc. Or you could go to the basic starter island that seems pretty simple, but then has a lot of industrial objectives, things like protecting trains, protecting tanks, that type of stuff. There's a lot of mission variety here that can be a lot of fun to get into, and as you progress through a run, each island that you have not already done will get harder enemies, more complicated missions, etc. to match your growing power level. Once you've done at least 2 islands, you can choose to move on to the final island at any point, which only has 1 mission involved on it. A surface level battle where you're defending your power pylons from a number of enemy bugs, as well as navigating the terrain like a volcano that's slowly destroying the ground around you and raining fire down on you that can destroy your units instantaneously. Once you clear that map, you'll drop down into the core of the volcano with a bomb, and you need to defend said bomb for 5 turns from as many bugs as the game can throw at you, as well as continuing to navigate deadly terrain. If you survive, the bomb goes off, you've successfully cleared a run, and you get to choose 1 pilot to come with you into a future run. Obviously, you're going to be choosing your most highly leveled, highly skilled pilot. Runs are fairly reasonable. It takes me now about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do a complete run, with any given island being maybe 20, 30-ish minutes, depending on how difficult it is and how much time you spend thinking and trying to redo your moves. And each run essentially starts completely fresh, other than that 1 pilot that you can potentially choose to bring forward with you. If any of your mechs are destroyed on any given mission, you don't lose the mech, but you do lose the pilot, which can become quite a problem when said pilots do level up over time, and those few skills and levels that they can get are difficult to achieve and usually very powerful and very swingy for you in terms of your capabilities on the battlefield. The thing that makes Into the Breach so difficult is it is very narrow in terms of what it allows you to get away with and what it allows you to do. Every turn is a puzzle, probably the single most puzzly strategy game that I've ever played. You know exactly what attacks are going to go where, what order enemies are going to attack in, what effects your attacks will have and their attacks will have, and there is absolutely zero RNG involved. What you see is what you get. And you definitely need to pay attention to that because each of these attacks could be deadly for you or the objectives that you're trying to protect. If you don't execute each turn as efficiently as possible, you're going to find it is near impossible to get to the end of any given mission with all of your resources and squad intact. And you might think, well, it's okay if I lose a couple of power pylons, right? Which is essentially your health bar, your mission objective bar. I can get more back. There's power that you can get for mission objectives. You can buy it at the end of an island with the points that you build up that you can spend to get upgrades, weapons, etc., etc. And while that's true, you have to keep in mind, every time you lose power, you either need to go out of your way to do a mission to get power back, which could be an even more difficult mission than the one you were on previously, or might not completely replenish what you have lost, or again, you'll have to spend valuable resources to replenish your power grid that you might want to be spending and probably should be spending on new weapons, new pilots, reactor cores so you can upgrade the mechs and weapons that you already have. All the types of things that are going to increase your power level to accommodate for the fact that each island is going to get more difficult as you approach it. Even if you don't upgrade your weapons, don't get better pilots and all that type of good jazz, the islands, they don't care. The Vek, they don't care either. They're going to keep getting more difficult. So you need to make sure that you're spending your resources wisely to be able to actually get the upgrades that you need to stay competitive. To say nothing of the fact that it is very common in the final mission to lose a number of power pylons in short succession just because there are so many enemies being thrown at you, and you may not always have the ability to prevent every attack on every pylon every turn. So the early game of Into the Breach is extremely important. You want to be maximizing your gains, minimizing your losses, and a run can very quickly snowball into failure if you're not careful. Given the fact that you can't rely on random dodges or crits or enemies generally being rather forgiving, it's very easy to get frustrated if you're someone who's coming into this game who's used to your more standard Fire Emblems, Final Fantasy Tactics, and the like. Things that are far more forgiving and give you a lot more options to deal with situations that you may have gotten yourself into or that the game just threw at you, and you aren't fully equipped mentally or resource-wise to find the perfect solution out of. It is not uncommon to sit in one turn of Into the Breach, for me at least, for 10 minutes sometimes, just trying different options, moving things around, undoing moves, thinking about if I move this Vek over here, it will attack that Vek and destroy it, but then that Vek being gone means that a different attack will be able to get through to destroy my last building, which will drain my power, which will lose the run. How can I prevent that? Well, if I move this mech over here in its way, it can absorb the attack, I'll just barely survive, but then we still have 2 turns left in the mission, so I might not be able to deal with having such low HP in case I need to block an attack elsewhere. It is very much like chess, one of the most chess-like games that I have played, seeing as how it just doesn't have any forgiveness for you. You need to think everything through very clearly and with very focused intent on making sure that you can survive future turns, not just the current turn. And if you mess something up, the game will take advantage of it and you will lose your run. Now, of course, being a roguelite, losing a run is kind of expected. It's the type of thing that you would imagine is going to happen. But the thing that's very unforgiving with Into the Breach is you don't get a lot of meta progression without completing runs. A lot of where you're going to be getting your upgrade tokens to buy future squads comes in the form of completing islands and actually finishing a run with a squad that you have not finished it with before. If you don't do that, the most that you can potentially get for future meta progression for future runs is going to be like little objectives like, say, oh, use the teleporter mech in the flame squad to teleport an enemy from 4 spaces away. You'll get progression for that once when you unlock that achievement the first time, but that's it. Beyond randomly being able to find pilots and time pods that you'll then be able to choose for future runs, which really is not a power boost in and of itself, it's just a different way to play the game, it can feel really bad when you just brutally lose a run, especially maybe 2 or 3 islands into it, and you have essentially nothing to show for it. If you don't have the resilience to be able to handle that type of a loss, I can very easily see why you would bounce off of Into the Breach, and I think that is what happened to a lot of people. Compared to FTL, Into the Breach was not nearly as successful, nearly as popular, and while it didn't need to be, since FTL was definitely a very lightning in a bottle moment, it's still a shame to see because mechanically there's a ton to love here. Like, now that I've finally bashed my head against the wall enough, overcome my own frustrations, and it's easier for me to see the matrix and figure out what it is that I need to do on any given run, in any given turn, to potentially find success, let alone judge, well, can I survive another island, or do I need to go to the final mission now while I'm in a solid position? Like, these are all skills that you will obtain over time playing this game as you gain experience. Until I got to that point, it was very frustrating. There was a period of probably a year and a half, 2 years, where I had dropped the game and decided I hated it, terrible game, I never want to touch it again. And then one day I just decided, well, there's a new update, there's a bunch of new mechs that got added, a bunch of new enemy vac and mission objectives, there's more variety, we'll try it again. And that was when it finally clicked for me. It's still not a game that I've played a ton. I need to be in the right mood to decide to pick it up and do a few runs, but when I do get in that mood, it is very satisfying to perfectly plan out a strategy, execute on it, and be rewarded for it. It's that type of game. It's very feast or famine, not something that you can just jump into like a run of Fire Emblem, run a campaign, try out some different characters with some different builds, and just have fun with it. You need to be on your game with Into the Breach. If that sounds like your thing, I do highly recommend checking it out. It's on Steam and now on mobile as well, which is actually pretty cool. I want to pick it up there at some point. It seems like a pretty good mobile game. If you really want to be able to dive into a very cool world with time travel and giant mecha and killing bugs and saving humanity with a very, very serious strategy bent, way less RPG here for sure, then Into the Breach might be for you. It's not expensive, and there is a ton of fun to get out of it. Just with the number of squads to unlock and try out, let alone maximizing each squad, let alone the fact that there's custom squads that you can swap around, like, it is really, really cool, especially once you start getting into different builds with, oh, well, I'm going to combine this mech that does judo flips to move enemies around with this mech that can put down clouds of smoke that negate all attacks from anything that's inside of it, with this mech that allows me to freeze things so that I can then lock them down and keep them in the smoke forever, as maybe I'll find a really cool weapon this run that allows me to do a bunch of AoE damage so I can move everything into one spot and blow it all up on one turn. There's a lot of cool things that can be done here, but you need to be ready to dedicate the time to learn the way the game plays. If you don't do that, it will destroy you. In my video discussing Metal Slug Tactics, I compared it a lot to Into the Breach because of the mechanics that it has at play. The revives system in Metal Slug Tactics being similar to the power system in Into the Breach, or the way your characters level and getting maybe 1 or 2 upgrades that you can choose from being kind of similar to the way your pilots level in Into the Breach and how you need to apply reactor cores to upgrade their mechs. Each game is distinct for sure, but if you've played both games, you can see the similarities. And if you're at all interested in Metal Slug Tactics, maybe you've played the demo, really enjoyed it, consider potentially looking Into the Breach, but definitely do your research first. It is a blast of a game, but I would not be surprised if it really frustrated you at first. If you're the type of person to bash your head against the wall, maybe a Souls-like player who also likes tactics games like myself, then that challenge might be appealing to you, even if in the moment it is enraging, but it's not for everyone. So definitely watch some videos, see some Let's Plays, some streams, and decide if maybe it would be for you. That said, though, I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. This has been the Saturday/Sunday Strategy Spotlight. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and thank you to all of my channel supporters, whether you are a YouTube member or a patron. You can see all of the names scrolling by on the right-hand side here. As I say always, this would be infinitely more difficult to do, the whole YouTube thing, without that support from y'all. When we're in periods like this where we don't have a big game that we're covering and ad rev is down, you guys help make my life so much easier. It makes it so much more feasible to continue putting so much time into YouTube as a career. So thank you all so much for the support, and if you would like to support, links to my Patreon and YouTube memberships are in the description down below. Thank you all so much. With all that said, though, I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.